Okay, next on the list, story number 5, and then a short poem afterwards, is Ian McNeish. Ian is from Police Scotland, retired officer, a member of IPA Scotland, and again, another valued member of the IPA Writers Special Interest Group, a published author, and gives a lot of help and support to other newbie writers, helps and supports us along the way, and he's a really valued member of the IPA Writers Special Interest Group. So over to you, Ian.
First of all, can everybody hear me? Yep, okay then. From the sublime to the ridiculous, it's me now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a special hello to Bill McLaughlin. I've never seen you for months, Bill. This is a cross between Hemingway and Wordsworth you're about to hear. Well, perhaps not. It's called A Strange Tale of a Torch and Ghostly Breathing. It's actually a true story of daring do and bravery that'll bring a tear to any glass eye. Many, many moons ago, in fact, about 45 years ago, when I had less than 2 years service and I worked in the far northern reaches of this British Isles, I was called out to support another officer one winter's night. It was at 1 o'clock in the morning, I think. It was a hellish night. And we were called to a remote cluster of houses in an estate north of Tain, midway between Tain and Dornoch, really. And to give you a clue where that is, it's about 40 odd to 50 miles north of Inverness. It seems that occupiers of this estate house were away for a few days, and a neighbouring farm worker had heard some noises and suspected something. He didn't know. Anyway, we attended. And bear in mind, both of us had less than 2 years services. We were in the middle of nowhere. I think I put that down. We were both apprentice Hamish Macbeths. It was about midnight anyway, as I said. The house was unlocked, and it was nearly half a century ago. And up there, that wasn't really different. They never locked their houses. And it was a different life up there. There wasn't any judgmental Guardian readers to harass us. We led an honest and a simple life. Anyway, we set about to search the house by torchlight, because funnily enough, the electricity was off. So, big house, downstairs was clear, so we headed up the stairs cautiously and we split up. I headed into a bedroom on my right, swung the torch round, empty. Checked under the bed, a pair of slippers and a bit of stour or dust. I was just about to exit the room when I heard a loud, blood-curdling scream coming from the room my colleague had entered. On hearing the scream, like a good colleague, I ran out onto the landing, pitch black out there, towards where he was, and in the dark crashed straight into him, dropping my torch. We didn't have yellow luminous jackets in these days. A Brian Ricks moment was narrowly avoided as we swayed about in the landing. Honestly, nearly both of us teetering down the stairs. My colleague was gasping for breath. In a stage whisper, he said, "In there," indicating the bedroom he'd been in. I went in, he said, "I heard breathing." When I swung my torch round, the intruder shone his torch right in my eyes, blinding me. I just stood there, and all I could hear was heavy breathing. He hasn't spoken, this guy. He just shone the torch in my eyes and breathed heavily. He can't be well. He must be. He was threatening. I just about shit myself and let out a scream as I ran out of the room. I dropped my torch and I heard it bouncing down the stairs. Hence, we were now standing on the top of the stairs. Just to say, that guy's career would eventually lead to the nosebleeding heights of a chief superintendent, a born leader, obviously. I told him to wait where he was and tentatively pushed the bedroom door open, leaned forward and cautiously poked my head round the door for a wee peek. Peering into the pitch black and seeing nothing. I could hear the deep breathing, however. It really was quite spooky. It seemed kind of far away, as if not in the room, and I couldn't work that out. Really ghostly. I stood listening and the breathing continued, and I was puzzled. And it seemed to be coming from the far side, over the bed, by the wall somewhere. Quite unnerving. I slowly took one step into the room and waited. And apart from the strange ghostly breathing, total silence. I didn't switch my torch on at first. This is my strategic thinking. As I tried to get my eyes accustomed to the darkness, I also had the daft notion that I did not want to give the intruder a target. In a commanding, no-nonsense voice, I said, "We know you're in there, so just tell us who you are and come to the door. You cannot escape." Silence. I shouted again. Still silence, but the breathing continued, quite harsh and hard. I was getting a bit spooked. I shouted, "Okay, we're coming in," and I switched on my torch, directing the beam to the far side of the room, where the sound of breathing was coming from. But I couldn't see anything, nothing. Just the wall, an old-fashioned house this was, with the old-fashioned wallpaper, a big window in the middle. I swung my torch further round to my left, and at the junction of that window wall opposite me and the adjoining wall that ran into my left, right in that far corner at an angle, was a full-length old-fashioned wardrobe. Affixed to the front of the wardrobe door was a full-length mirror. As I shone my torch across it, the beam reflected across the room. Suddenly we both burst out laughing, I think probably with relief. Earlier, when my colleague had entered the room, at first on his own, he went further in than I had, and as he swung his torch round, he was directly opposite the mirror and was immediately caught in the reflection of his own returned torch beam. He'd almost scared the shit out of himself with his own torch beam, screamed and run out of the room. We both bent double with laughter. We checked the room and it was totally empty. However, the breathing continued, deep and rhythmical. We went over to the window, looked behind and under the bed, nothing. It was coming from outside. Anyway, we checked through the house. There was no intruders and all was well. We headed back to the office with some being a first aider, where some medicinal spirit was administered to help my colleague get over his shock. I obviously took some of the same medicine. Being a first aider, I'd warned, and being well trained, I knew about the danger of delayed shock. It can be a dangerous game, this policing lark. With the breathing, we headed round the back of the house before we headed back to the station. And right against the wall of the house, under the big window, was an old ewe sheep in a deep sleep, breathing its heart out, probably dreaming of its contribution to the Harris Tweed industry, I'll be bound. There you go. Tales of the unexpected, totally true.
Fabulous. I could listen to you all night, Ian. That was brilliant. And I love your, not only the sound effects, but your turn and phrase. No judgmental Guardian readers to harass us. That was brilliant. Really, really good. Love that. Especially
I've got a poem now.
The twist at the end. And Ian has now got a poem for us called French Kissing.
It's called French Kissing. I need to give you a wee lead into this. I never wrote this one. I've got a very good friend who lives in Cork. I was going to say in Southern Ireland, but I should just say in the south of Ireland, so as I don't offend anybody. He was born in Plumtree in London in the same year as I was born, 1946, immediately after the war. And we became friends a long time ago to do with other stuff. He's a singer, songwriter, performer, writer, and a poet. He says he now lives in Cork, and I love his stuff. So a lot of his stories they're really very descriptive pieces, and they actually describe incidents that took place in his life, an awful lot of them, and I love them. I've got 2 or 3 books on them. This is when he was about 16 or so, still in London at that time. It's called French Kissing. Janet cornered me in the stationery cupboard, Christmas Eve, just before 6. She was full of Bacardi and I was full of lust. An anemic office boy with pimples full of pus. But in the darkness, she didn't seem to mind. And even when I held her behind in my sweaty hands, that only came in for some foolscap. "You're in my little trap," said Janet, breathless between kisses, French and wet. Though I knew I'd never get any further than my tongue between her teeth, which was really rather a relief, with her fiancé waiting at reception, and him a 12-stone lighterman from Tilbury, with a forest of hair growing from his ears, and me, an underweight, asthmatic little chap, who only went looking for a ream of foolscap. There you go. True story.
Brilliant. Fabulous. Straight out of a Ben Ewell sketch, that could be. Ernie, he rode the fastest milk cart in the West. Ian, that was brilliant. Thank you for sharing those with us. That was really,
Thank
really
you for
good.
listening.
Fabulous. Really good.